The transmission crackled through the deep space receivers with a sound that made every technician in the control room freeze. Director Alex Turner watched the massive screens as strange symbols filled the displays, followed by a voice that spoke. In perfect English, despite coming from somewhere beyond the solar system, "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Galactic Council, representatives of 200 civilized worlds. We have observed your recent achievements in space travel and deem you ready for contact." The voice belonged to something that called itself Ambassador Crix of the Hive Collective. Through the video feed, Turner could see a creature that looked like a giant mantis wearing ceremonial robes. Its compound eyes glittered as it spoke, and its mandibles clicked between words. "Your species has shown remarkable progress in the past century. Chemical rockets, basic satellites, and crude weapons show promise for eventual development. We extend our protection to your world and offer guidance in your journey toward civilization." Turner exchanged glances with his deputy, Commander Roy Davis. Both men had spent their careers preparing for this moment, but not in the way the alien believed. The Terran Defense Initiative had been planning for first contact for decades, and their strategy was already in motion. "Respond with Protocol Alpha," Turner whispered to the communications officer. "Full primitive display." The officer nodded and activated the prepared response. On the screens, the aliens would see a crude representation of Earth's technology. Ancient rocket designs from the 2020s, basic nuclear weapons, and population estimates that showed only 2 billion humans scattered across a single planet. "We are honored by your contact," the human representative on screen said, reading from a carefully prepared script. "Earth welcomes your wisdom and guidance. We have much to learn from your advanced civilization." Ambassador Crix seemed pleased by the response. "Indeed, your species shows appropriate humility. Our preliminary scans indicate you possess basic fusion technology and have barely begun to explore your own system. This is acceptable for initial contact," Turner almost smiled. Their scans had detected exactly what humanity wanted them to find. The real fusion reactors, the ones that powered ships capable of crossing the galaxy in days, remained hidden in deep space facilities that existed in parallel dimensions. The technology that made such concealment possible was beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever imagined. "We will dispatch a delegation to your world within one solar cycle," Crix continued. "Prepare your leaders for formal integration procedures. Your world will be classified as a protected development zone until you reach minimum civilization standards." The transmission ended, leaving the control room in tense silence. Turner turned to address his staff, men and women who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity from exactly this scenario. "Ladies and gentlemen, the masquerade begins now. Every action, every word, every piece of technology we show them must support the illusion that we are primitive, weak, and grateful for their protection." Commander Davis stepped forward. "Sir, our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive energy signatures moving toward our system. Whatever their true intentions, they're bringing serious firepower." "Expected," Turner replied. "No civilization maintains control over 200 worlds through diplomacy alone. They're coming to evaluate our threat level, and we're going to show them exactly what they want to see." Dr. Emma Walsh, the project's chief scientist, raised her hand. "The quantum computers have finished analyzing their transmission protocols. Their encryption is centuries behind our current standards. We can monitor all their communications without detection." Perfect. What else did the analysis reveal? "Their technology is impressive by galactic standards, but primitive compared to our capabilities. They use matter-antimatter reactions for power, while we mastered zero-point energy extraction decades ago. Their fastest ships appear to use some form of hyperspace drive, which is elegant but limited. Our quantum tunnel drives make their vessels look like sailing ships." Turner nodded. "Remember, that information stays in this room. As far as the galaxy is concerned, we're struggling to achieve basic spaceflight." The next few hours were spent in frantic preparation. Underground facilities across Earth received new orders. The massive orbital defense platforms, invisible to conventional sensors, powered down to minimal operation. The fleet of 10,000 ships hidden in parallel space dimensions received orders to maintain absolute silence. Most importantly, the 15 billion humans living on Earth and the 200 hidden colonies scattered across the galaxy were instructed to maintain the greatest deception in human history. 3 days later, the first alien ships appeared in Earth's orbit. They were enormous, each one the size of a small city, their hulls gleaming with unknown alloys. To any observer, they would appear as vessels of unimaginable power. Turner watched from the hidden command center as the aliens deployed their landing craft. The surface would see primitive human technology, grateful populations, and leaders eager to learn from their advanced visitors. They would never suspect that those same leaders could glass entire star systems with weapons that existed. In dimensions the aliens couldn't even detect. Ambassador Crix emerged from the lead ship at the designated landing site in Geneva. The creature was even more imposing in person, standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its entourage included representatives from other council races, a delegation of the galaxy's most powerful beings. Come to evaluate humanity's potential. President Maria Santos greeted them with carefully rehearsed humility. Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your presence and eager to learn from your wisdom. The aliens seemed satisfied by the reception. They toured carefully prepared facilities that showcased humanity's best technology, primitive by their standards, but impressive enough to warrant continued interest. They met with scientists who presented obsolete theories with genuine enthusiasm, and military leaders who demonstrated weapons that were decades behind even basic galactic standards. Your species shows promise, Crix announced at the end of the first day. With proper guidance, you may achieve basic interstellar capability within a few centuries. We will establish monitoring stations in your system to ensure your development proceeds safely. Turner watched the broadcast from his hidden bunker, surrounded by displays showing humanity's true capabilities. Faster-than-light communications linked him to fleet commanders stationed in distant galaxies. Weapons capable of destroying stars stood ready in pocket dimensions, and artificial intelligences that surpassed any organic mind processed countless scenarios for the coming conflict. The masquerade had begun. Let the galaxy believe humanity was weak, primitive, and grateful for protection. Let them establish their monitoring stations and speak of humans as amusing primitives. Every day they spent in that delusion brought them closer to the fatal mistake. That would end their dominance forever. The most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't the species that appeared strongest, but the one that appeared weakest while hiding strength beyond imagination. 5 years had passed since the Galactic Council's arrival, and the mining operations on Europa were entering their final phase. Commander Roy Davis floated in the observation deck of the hidden station Prometheus, watching massive alien extractors tear into the ice moon's surface. Each day, they shipped millions of tons of rare elements to Council worlds. Payment for their protection of humanity. The official story was simple enough. Earth needed guidance, and the Council provided it in exchange for access to the solar system's resources. The human government on the surface expressed gratitude for this arrangement, praising their alien benefactors for their wisdom and patience with such a primitive species. Davis turned away from the viewport with disgust. Below him, through reinforced transparent aluminum, he could see the true scope of the operation. The Council had established permanent mining installations on 17 moons and asteroids, each one stripping away resources that had taken billions of years to form. They did it with casual efficiency, the way a farmer might harvest crops. "Sir, we're receiving another tribute request," Lieutenant Amy Foster reported from her station. "High Commander Vorth is demanding an additional 1,000 tons of platinum from the Mars colonies." Mars colonies? Davis raised an eyebrow. According to the official records, humanity had barely managed to establish a small research station on Mars. The thriving cities with millions of inhabitants remained hidden beneath the planet's surface, their existence concealed by holographic projectors, and dimensional barriers. The surface colonies, sir. They're maintaining the illusion that it's a struggling outpost of a few hundred scientists. Davis nodded. The performance had to be perfect. Every human who interacted with the council had been trained for their role. They played their parts as grateful primitives while the real civilization continued its work in hidden dimensions. His communicator chimed with an urgent message from Admiral Lisa Chun, commander of the Terran fleet. Davis activated the quantum encryption and found himself looking at a woman whose calm exterior concealed one of the most brilliant military minds in human history. Roy, we have a situation. The Council is requesting human workers for their deep space projects. They're calling it a volunteer program, but the requirements suggest they're expecting compliance rather than choice. Davis felt his stomach tighten. How many? 50,000 initially, with promises of more opportunities for those who prove themselves. They're offering what they consider generous compensation and the chance to see the galaxy. And if we refuse? They haven't said directly. But the implications are clear? Protected species are expected to contribute to galactic civilization. Refusal would suggest we're not ready for the responsibilities that come with council membership. Davis understood the real meaning. The council was testing humanity's compliance. They wanted to see how easily humans could be moved around the galaxy like resources, how readily they would accept demands disguised as opportunities. What's the official response? President Santos is expressing enthusiasm for the program while raising concerns about Earth's ability to spare so many people. She's buying us time to analyze their real intentions. Through the quantum link, Davis could see the tactical displays behind Admiral Chun. The hidden fleet was spread across dozens of systems, each ship capable of destroying entire planets. 10,000 vessels waited in dimensional storage, their crews trained for a war the Council couldn't imagine. Admiral, what's your assessment of their military capabilities? We've completed analysis of their standard battle groups. Their ships are large, well-armed by galactic standards, but they rely on conventional physics. Their weapons are matter-based, their shields use gravitational manipulation, and their faster-than-light drives require several minutes to charge between jumps. Davis smiled grimly. Humanity's weapons existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Their shields could deflect attacks that hadn't been fired yet, and their drives could cross the galaxy in hours. The Council's most advanced technology was centuries behind human capabilities. Any significant threats? Their numbers are substantial. Intelligence suggests they maintain active fleets totaling over 1 million ships across their territory. However, their tactics are predictable and their coordination relies on sublight communication networks that we can disrupt at will. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the surface. Ambassador Crix was making another of his regular visits to Earth's leaders, this time accompanied by High Commander Vorth of the Dominion. Davis switched to the surface surveillance feeds and watched as the aliens materialized in the Geneva meeting hall. Vorth was a reptilian creature that stood nearly 10 feet tall, its scales shifting between gold and green as it moved. Unlike the diplomatic Crix, Vorth made no attempt to hide its contempt for humanity. Your species has made acceptable progress, Vorth announced to the assembled human officials. However, we have observed concerning signs of independence in your development. This cannot continue. President Santos maintained her carefully practiced expression of respectful confusion. I don't understand, High Commander. We have followed all Council guidelines for protected species. Your people ask too many questions about our technology. Your scientists request access to data that is beyond your current understanding. These behaviors suggest you are not accepting your proper place in the galactic order. Davis watched as Tom Wells, the human ambassador to the Council, stepped forward with perfect timing. High Commander, if our people have caused offense, it was unintentional. We are eager to learn, perhaps too eager. Please guide us toward appropriate behavior. Vorth's scaled lips pulled back in what might have been a smile. Indeed, your enthusiasm is understandable but misguided. You will focus your development on the areas we designate. mining technology, basic manufacturing, and food production. Leave advanced sciences to species capable of understanding them. The insult was deliberate, designed to test human reactions. Davis watched as the officials on screen maintained their poses of humble acceptance, while their true thoughts remained hidden behind psychic barriers that the Council couldn't detect. "We understand, High Commander," Santos replied. "Earth will focus on contributing to galactic civilization in ways appropriate to our capabilities." "Excellent. We will establish additional monitoring stations throughout your system to ensure compliance. Your mining operations will be expanded to include the asteroid belt, and we will require increased tribute to support these improvements." As the meeting continued, Davis reviewed the intelligence reports flowing in from across the galaxy. The Council's treatment of humanity was typical of their approach to newly contacted species. They identified useful resources, established protection agreements, and gradually increased their demands until the protected species became little more than servants. The pattern was always the same: initial contact, assessment of capabilities, establishment of protection, resource extraction, labor requisition, and finally complete subjugation. The Council had perfected the process over centuries, and they had never encountered resistance they couldn't crush, but they had never encountered humanity before. Davis closed the tactical displays and returned to watching the mining operations on Europa. Each day, the Council grew more confident in their assessment of human capabilities. Each day, they became more convinced that Earth was just another primitive world to be exploited and controlled. They were making exactly the mistake humanity had been waiting for them to make. The greatest predators in the galaxy had never learned to fear prey that could hunt them back. They had never encountered a species that could hide its true nature so completely that even their most advanced sensors detected nothing but grateful primitivs. Soon, very soon, they would learn that some prey was more dangerous than any predator. The masquerade continued, and with each passing day, the Council moved closer to their fatal mistake. The explosion echoed across the Martian desert as another human resistance cell struck at the Council's mining operation. Don Murphy crouched behind a boulder, his face covered by a makeshift mask, and watched the alien supervisors scramble to respond to the attack. The stolen explosives had damaged 3 extractors, enough to slow production for several days. "Fall back to secondary positions," he shouted to his team, knowing the Council monitoring devices would record every word. "We've shown them that humans won't be slaves forever." The resistance fighters disappeared into the rocky terrain, following routes that had been carefully planned to avoid the most sensitive Council sensors. Within minutes, Dominion security forces arrived at the scene, their powered armor gleaming in the red sunlight. High Commander Vorth examined the damage with obvious annoyance. "Primitive explosives and crude tactics. These humans are becoming troublesome." Dr. Nex, the Council's chief scientist, collected samples of the explosive residue. Chemical compounds consistent with their technological level. Nothing sophisticated, but effective enough to cause delays. How long to repair the damage? 48 hours for full restoration. The humans targeted junction points in the extraction system, showing basic understanding of our equipment. Vorth's scaled features twisted with contempt. Barely civilized creatures attacking their betters. Perhaps it's time to demonstrate the consequences of such behavior. The conversation was recorded by sensors hidden in the Martian rock, transmitted through quantum channels to command centers the Council couldn't detect. Don Murphy and his resistance cell were volunteers from the real Terran military, their every action carefully coordinated to provide maximum intelligence value while maintaining the illusion of primitive desperation. In the hidden command center beneath Geneva, Director Turner watched the feeds with satisfaction. Perfect execution. They're getting exactly the impression we want them to have. Commander Davis studied the tactical readouts. Vorth is getting frustrated. Our psychological profiles suggest he's approaching the point where he'll recommend stronger measures. Good. The more arrogant they become, the more likely they are. To make the mistake we're waiting for. The resistance campaign had been running for 6 months, a carefully orchestrated series of small attacks designed to appear like the desperate actions of oppressed primitives. Every strike used technology that was decades old by human standards. Every tactic was deliberately crude, and every victory was small enough to seem like luck rather than skill. The Council's response was predictable. They increased security, added more monitoring stations, and began discussing the need for stronger measures to control the human population. Each step moved them closer to the fatal error that would justify humanity's true response. Dr. Emma Walsh entered the command center carrying a data tablet. We've completed analysis of the captured Council equipment from the latest raid. Their weapons are impressive for their tech level, but nothing we haven't seen before. Weaknesses? Several. Their energy weapons rely on focused plasma containment, which is vulnerable to dimensional interference. Their armor uses layered shields that can be overloaded by quantum fluctuations. Most importantly, their communication systems are hardwired to prevent jamming, which makes them easy to track and intercept. Turner nodded. Every piece of intelligence brought them closer to understanding the Council's true capabilities. The resistance raids weren't just theater. They were comprehensive intelligence gathering operations disguised as primitive attacks. What about their personnel? Interesting patterns. The Dominion forces are disciplined but arrogant. They assume human weapons can't threaten them, so they take minimal precautions. The Hive Collective supervisors are more cautious but lack individual initiative. The other Council races seem to follow established protocols without adaptation. Exploitable? Definitely. Their tactics are rigid, their technology is standardized, and their coordination depends on hierarchical command structures. A sufficiently creative enemy could cause significant disruption. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the surface. Ambassador Crix was arriving for an emergency meeting with Earth's leadership, accompanied by a full diplomatic escort and what appeared to be a military assessment team. Turner activated the surface surveillance network and watched as the alien ships landed in Geneva. The delegation was larger than usual, including representatives from all major Council races and several military advisors. Their body language suggested this was more than a routine diplomatic visit. Mr. President, Crix began, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of the meeting hall. We have serious concerns about the recent increase in human resistance activity. President Santos maintained her expression of troubled concern. Ambassador, I assure you that these incidents do not represent the views of humanity as a whole. We are investigating these extremist groups and will bring those responsible to justice. The attacks are becoming more frequent and more sophisticated, High Commander Vorth interjected. Your people are showing signs of coordinated resistance that suggests external support. External support? Santos looked genuinely confused. High Commander, Earth has no contact with any civilization other than the Council. How could we receive external support? Dr. Nex stepped forward, carrying a container of evidence. Analysis of the explosive devices shows traces of elements that are not native to your system. Either your people have developed more advanced mining capabilities than we believed, or they are receiving assistance from unknown sources. Turner smiled as he watched the exchange. The elements in question were common throughout the galaxy, but the Council's assumption that humans couldn't access them revealed their continued underestimation of human capabilities. I can assure you, Ambassador Wells said, that Earth has no hidden allies or advanced capabilities. Our people are simply becoming desperate under the pressure of increased tribute demands. Desperate enough to attack Council installations? Vorth's voice carried a dangerous edge. This suggests your species is not ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship. The threat was clear. Santos responded with exactly the right mixture of fear and determination. High Commander, please understand that the vast majority of humanity is grateful for Council protection. These attacks are the work of a small minority who cannot accept the realities of our situation. Then perhaps it's time to help them understand those realities, Vorth replied. We will be increasing security throughout your system. Any human found near Council installations without authorization will be detained. Any resistance activity will be met with appropriate force. The meeting continued for another hour, but the real message had been delivered. The Council was preparing to crack down on human resistance, and they were considering humanity's fitness for continued protection status. As the aliens departed, Turner reviewed the intelligence gathered during the meeting. The Council was following their established pattern, moving from tolerance to suppression as resistance increased. They were also beginning to suspect that humans might be more capable than they appeared, but their arrogance prevented them from considering the full implications. How long until they make their move? Davis asked. Based on their historical patterns, 6 months to a year. They'll try economic pressure first, then limited military action. If that doesn't work, they'll consider more extreme measures. And if they choose the extreme option? Turner's expression grew cold. Then they'll discover that humanity has been preparing for this moment since the day we first detected their signals. They'll learn that every resistance attack was intelligence gathering. Every tribute payment was a strategic delay, and every act of humble submission was part of the greatest deception in galactic history. The masquerade was entering its final phase. The Council believed they were dealing with primitive rebels armed with stolen explosives and desperate courage. They had no idea they were facing a species that had been preparing for interstellar war for over a century. Soon, very soon, they would make the mistake that would end their dominance forever, and humanity would be ready. The ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by High Commander Vorth himself with the cold efficiency of a predator announcing feeding time. President Santos sat in the emergency session of the United Nations, her face pale but determined, as she read the Council's demands to the assembled representatives. By order of the Galactic Council, the protected species of Earth will provide 50 million workers for deep space mining operations within 60 standard days. This workforce will be transported to designated systems for essential resource extraction supporting galactic civilization. The numbers were staggering. 50 million people, roughly 3% of Earth's official population, to be shipped across the galaxy as laborers. The Council's language was carefully diplomatic, but the meaning was clear: slavery disguised as opportunity. The Council recognizes this represents a significant commitment from your developing world. Santos continued reading, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the demand. However, protected species must contribute to galactic prosperity in proportion to the benefits they receive. In the hidden command center, Director Turner watched the session with growing anticipation. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the escalation that would justify humanity's true response. The Council was making exactly the mistake the Terran Defense Initiative had been planning for. Benefits? Representative Johnson from the North American Federation stood up, his voice filled with carefully scripted outrage. What benefits? They strip mine our system, demand tribute, and now they want to take our people? The benefits of protection, Ambassador Wells replied, playing his role perfectly. Without Council oversight, Earth would be vulnerable to hostile species, natural disasters, and the chaos of unguided development. The debate continued for hours, with representatives expressing the full range of human emotions from fear to anger to reluctant acceptance. It was a masterful performance, designed to show the Council exactly what they expected to see: a primitive species struggling with demands beyond their comprehension. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Admiral Lisa Shun reviewed the deployment. Orders that would soon activate the most powerful military force in galactic history. The Terran fleet had been waiting in parallel dimensions for 8 years, their crews trained and ready for the war that was about to begin. Final intelligence assessment, she requested from her Chief of Staff. Council forces are at normal deployment levels. They have no indication of unusual activity in human-controlled space. Their security protocols remain focused on preventing primitive human resistance rather than advanced military threats. Chun nodded. The Council's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They had maintained galactic dominance for so long that they couldn't imagine a species capable of challenging them. Their sensors looked for known threats. Their tactics were designed for conventional warfare, and their strategy assumed that superior technology would always prevail. They had never encountered an enemy that had deliberately hidden their true capabilities for nearly a decade. The crisis deepened when President Santos announced Earth's official response. The United Nations has voted to comply with the Council's request, despite the enormous burden this places on our people. We will begin identifying volunteers for the deep space program immediately. The announcement triggered exactly the reaction the Council expected. Protests erupted in major cities, resistance cells launched desperate attacks on Council installations, and human leaders made increasingly frantic attempts to negotiate better terms. High Commander Vorth watched the chaos with satisfaction. Typical primitive behavior. They rage against inevitability while lacking the power to change it. Dr. Nex was less certain. The resistance attacks are becoming more sophisticated. Yesterday's strike on the Jupiter mining platform used tactics that suggest military training. Irrelevant? Even if they had access to advanced weapons, they lacked the industrial capacity to threaten Council operations. A few successful raids mean nothing against our overall strength. The conversation was recorded by sensors that existed in dimensions the Council couldn't detect, transmitted to command centers they couldn't locate, and analyzed by artificial intelligences that surpassed their most advanced computers. Every word brought humanity closer to the justification they needed. The final straw came when the Council decided to demonstrate their power. Earth's compliance has been insufficient, Vorth announced to the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Their primitive emotions are interfering with their ability to fulfill their obligations. A demonstration of consequences is required. The vote was unanimous. Council forces would conduct a limited strike against human civilian targets to emphasize the seriousness of their demands. The attack would be carefully calibrated to cause maximum psychological impact while maintaining the fiction of benevolent protection. New Geneva was chosen as the target. The city housed one of Earth's major industrial centers, making it economically significant while containing minimal Council assets. The strike would demonstrate Council power while removing a source of resistance activity. Admiral Chun received the intelligence 24 hours before the attack was scheduled to begin. The Council's planning was thorough, their execution would be precise, and their destruction of human life would be absolute. 200,000 civilians, she reported to the emergency session of the Terran Defense Council. They're going to kill 200,000 people to make a point about compliance. Director Turner stood before the assembled commanders and political leaders who had spent their careers preparing for this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, the masquerade is over. The Council has just provided us with the justification we've been waiting for. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. For 8 years, humanity had maintained the greatest deception in galactic history. They had pretended to be primitive while building the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had acted weak while assembling weapons that could destroy solar systems. They had played the role of grateful primitives while preparing for a war that would reshape the balance of power among the stars. Protocol 7 is now authorized, Turner announced. The Terran fleet will reveal itself and respond to this act of genocide with overwhelming force. The galaxy will learn that humanity is not the primitive species they believed us to be. Admiral Chun saluted. Understood, sir. Fleet Admiral Wright has been notified. All ships are moving to attack positions. The orders went out through quantum channels that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hidden in parallel space began their transition to normal reality. Weapons that had been charged and ready for years powered up to full capacity. Crews that had trained for this moment their entire lives took their positions. The Council's attack on New Geneva would proceed exactly as planned. The orbital bombardment would begin at 0800 local time. The plasma strikes would level the city center, and 200,000 humans would die in the first few minutes, but this time, The galaxy would see what happened when you made the fatal mistake of attacking humanity. The masquerade was ending, and the real war was about to begin. The plasma bombardment of New Geneva began at exactly 0800 hours. The artificial sunrise of weapons fire painting the sky in colors that had no names. High Commander Vorth watched from his flagship as the city disappeared beneath pillars of superheated energy, 200,000 lives ending in seconds to make a point about galactic order. Broadcast the footage to all human settlements, he ordered. Let them see the consequences of resistance. The transmission went out across Earth's communication networks, showing the destruction in perfect clarity. The Council wanted every human to understand their place in the galactic hierarchy, to see what happened when primitives challenged their betters. They got exactly what they asked for. At 0803 hours, 3 minutes after the bombardment ended, space itself began to tear open around Earth. Reality twisted and folded as massive objects transitioned from parallel dimensions into normal space, their appearance defying every law of physics. The Council understood. The first ship to emerge was the Terran dreadnought Retribution, a vessel so large it cast shadows on continents. Its hull was composed of materials that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Its weapons drew power from quantum fluctuations that hadn't occurred yet, and its shields could deflect attacks that were still being fired. Admiral Ben Wright stood on the bridge of the Retribution, his weathered face calm as he watched the Council fleet scramble to respond to the impossible sight before them. Behind him, tactical displays showed the deployment of 10,000 ships, each one more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. All ships, this is Admiral Wright. The masquerade is over. Humanity will now demonstrate the consequences of genocide. The Council's response was swift and predictable. Vorth's fleet moved to engage the human vessels, their weapons charging, their shields activating, their crews confident in their technological superiority. They had destroyed countless primitive species, and they saw no reason why this encounter would be different. They were wrong. The Battle of Earth lasted 14 minutes. The Council's plasma cannons fired streams of superheated matter that should have vaporized any target, but the energy simply disappeared into dimensional folds in the human ships' hulls. Their antimatter torpedoes detonated with the force of small stars, but the explosions were absorbed by shields that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The human response was devastating. Weapons that manipulated time itself sent Council ships into temporal loops, forcing them to experience their own destruction repeatedly. Gravity manipulation devices created localized black holes that consumed entire battle groups. Most terrifying of all were the quantum cannons that fired bullets of pure possibility, each shot killing its target in every dimension where it might have existed. Impossible, Vorth whispered as his flagship's shields collapsed under weapons fire that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. No species possesses such technology. The answer came from Admiral Wright himself, his face appearing on every Council screen in the system. You are correct, High Commander. No species in your galaxy possesses such technology. But you made a fatal mistake in your assumptions about humanity. What are you? Vorth demanded, his voice filled with the first fear he had experienced in centuries. We are the species you believe to be primitive. We are the grateful primitives who thanked you for your protection. We are the weak civilization that needed your guidance to achieve basic spaceflight. Wright's expression grew cold. We are also the species that has been spacefaring for over 400 years, that has colonized 200 worlds in secret, and that has been preparing for this war since the day we first detected your signals. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. The primitive humans they had patronized and exploited were not only more advanced than any species in the galaxy, but they had been deliberately hiding their capabilities for nearly a decade. You played weak, Vorth said, understanding finally dawning in his reptilian features. We played extinct, Wright corrected. You never bothered to verify our population figures, never questioned our technological limitations, never investigated our resource capabilities. You saw what you expected to see and made your plans accordingly. The battle continued around them, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Council ships that had dominated the galaxy for centuries were being destroyed by weapons they couldn't understand, defended by technology they couldn't counter, and commanded by tactics they couldn't predict. But why? Vorth asked. You could have revealed yourselves at any time. You could have taken your place as the dominant species in the galaxy. Wright's smile was cold as the vacuum of space. Because we learned something that you never did. The greatest predators in the universe are not those that appear strongest, but those that appear weakest while hiding strength beyond imagination. You ruled the galaxy through fear and intimidation, but you never learned to fear anything in return. The Retribution's weapons locked onto Vorth's flagship, energy readings climbing to levels that would have powered entire star systems. You made the fatal mistake of believing that genocide was an acceptable tool of diplomacy. Now you will learn the consequences of that error. The final phase of the battle was not a battle at all, but an execution. Council ships throughout the galaxy found themselves facing human fleets that had been hidden in parallel dimensions. Their crews trained for this moment, their weapons charged and ready. The species that had dominated 200 worlds for centuries discovered that they had been surrounded by an enemy they never knew existed. Admiral Wright's final message was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy, a declaration that would reshape the balance of power among the stars forever. To all species of the Galactic Council, this is Admiral Wright of the Terran Fleet. Your leaders have committed genocide against the human species in an unprovoked attack on civilian targets. This action has ended the masquerade that humanity has maintained for the past 8 years. The transmission continued as Council worlds watched their fleets being systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't comprehend. For nearly a decade, humanity has played the role of grateful primitives, weak and dependent on Council protection. This was a deliberate deception designed to evaluate galactic civilization and prepare for this moment. On the bridge of the Retribution, Wright watched. As the last Council ships in Earth system were eliminated, we are not the species you believed us to be. We have been spacefaring for over 4 centuries. We have colonies in dimensions you cannot access. We possess technology that makes your most advanced weapons look like stone tools. The psychological impact was devastating. Every species in the galaxy had to confront the possibility that their assumptions about human capabilities were completely wrong. If humanity could hide such advanced technology for so long, what other species might be concealing their true nature? The Galactic Council's reign of exploitation is over, Wright announced. Any species that has been oppressed by Council forces is welcome to join the Terran Alliance. Any world that wishes to maintain its independence will be protected from Council retaliation. Any government that chooses to continue the old ways of domination and exploitation will face the consequences. High Commander Vorth, now a prisoner aboard the Retribution, was brought to the bridge under heavy guard. His scaled features showed a mixture of defeat and disbelief as he faced the human admiral who had destroyed his fleet in minutes. Your entire civilization was a lie, Vorth said, his voice hollow with shock. Our entire civilization was a test, Wright corrected. We wanted to see what kind of species dominated this galaxy, how they treated those they perceived as weak, and whether they were worthy of continued existence. And your conclusion? Wright gestured toward the tactical displays showing the complete destruction of Council forces throughout the galaxy. You failed the test. A truly advanced civilization protects the weak and nurtures developing species. You exploited and enslaved them. The interrogation was broadcast to every Council world, letting them see their greatest military commander reduced to a defeated prisoner. The psychological warfare was as devastating as the physical destruction. Breaking the aura of invincibility that had maintained Council power for centuries. What happens now? Vorth asked. Now you face trial for crimes against sentient beings. Genocide, slavery, exploitation, and the systematic oppression of hundreds of species across the galaxy. The evidence against you is overwhelming, and the penalty is death. The trial lasted 3 days and was broadcast throughout known space. Representatives from every species the Council had ever oppressed gave testimony about centuries of abuse, exploitation, and casual brutality. The evidence was damning, the verdict was unanimous, and the execution was swift. The aftermath reshaped galactic civilization. The Terran Alliance offered membership to any species willing to embrace principles of equality, cooperation, and mutual protection. Most of the galaxy's inhabitants joined within months, grateful to escape centuries of Council oppression. The few species that refused to abandon their aggressive ways found themselves facing the same fate as the original Council. Humanity had not revealed its strength to replace one tyrannical empire with another, but to establish a new order based on justice rather than fear. Years later, as Admiral Wright reviewed reports from across the galaxy, he reflected on the long deception that had made it all possible. The masquerade had cost humanity 8 years of careful planning and performance, but it had given them something invaluable: complete knowledge of their enemy's capabilities, tactics, and weaknesses. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in centuries. Former slave species were rebuilding their civilizations, new alliances were forming based on mutual respect rather than fear, and the threat of casual genocide had been eliminated forever. The species that had played weak until their enemies made a fatal mistake had become the guardians of galactic civilization, protectors of the innocent, and proof that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when destruction was necessary. The masquerade was over, but its lessons would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Never again would a species be judged by their apparent weaknesses, and never again would genocide be considered an acceptable tool of diplomacy. Humanity had won more than a war. They had won the right to reshape the galaxy according to principles of justice, equality, and protection for all sentient life. The greatest deception in galactic history had become the foundation for the greatest peace the universe had ever known.